Hello and good afternoon, everyone. We are still just a few minutes before the top of the hour, so we are going to give folks a few more minutes to join, but we did want to welcome you and let you know that you're in the right spot and you still have time to grab a cup of coffee if needed. We'll be back with you shortly. All right, well, it is 1 p.m. Eastern by my watch, and we do have some great content for you today. So we are going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Know Your Enemy, the Power of an Industry Approach Threat Model. My name is Amber Coulson, Event Marketing Manager with Newspire, coming to you live from just outside of snowy Detroit, Michigan. Before we get into today's topic, I'd like to mention just a few logistical items. Today's presentation should last about 30 minutes, but we are happy to stay on a bit longer to answer additional questions as needed. You can send in your questions using the questions or chat panel on your screen at any time during the presentation. We'll collect those and Justin will address them at the end. At any point in time, if you do have suggestions for future webinar topics, we also invite you to submit those via the chat panel. I'm always looking for other presentations we can bring to all of you. One special note, 3 lucky participants in today's webinar will receive a $25 Amazon gift voucher. If you're a winner, my fingers are crossed for you. You'll be notified in the next 72 hours via email. Finally, you'll receive a recording of today's webinar via email within the next 48 hours. I'd now like to introduce you to today's speaker, Justin Hurd, Newspire's Supervisor of Threat Intelligence and Rapid Response. Justin will tell you a little bit more about his role at Newspire in just a moment, but one fun fact that I've learned about him is that he's coached Little League football for elementary school students for 6 years. So if you need any on-field tips, definitely don't ask me, ask him. You can certainly catch up with him after today's presentation. With that, Justin, over to you.
Thank you, Amber. My name is Justin Hurd, and I've been here at Newspire for about 6 years. I have been about 11 years in the security and networking vertical here. I lead our threat intelligence team as a supervisor. We do threat hunting, incident response, as well as threat intelligence collection and distribution. So it's a little bit about me, and without further ado, I will get us started. So a little bit on the agenda. We're going to go over understanding the threat model, empowering your team, starting with the plan, knowing your enemy, and building your plan. So we'd like to start here with understanding threat modeling. And what threat modeling is a process for identifying gaps in your security. And in our case, we're identifying gaps based off of our industry in our security, based off the threat actors that are attacking our industry. There are a few other tools out there that focus on some of the software development lifecycle, as well as application-specific threat modeling. This threat modeling is really geared towards industry-specific threat actors, organizing those TTPs and making sure that we're filling those gaps with the proper controls. When conducting threat modeling, there are 3 things that we're really trying to get out of it. We're trying to understand where we're most vulnerable, how are we most likely due to be attacked based on the industry that we're in, and which security controls should we prioritize in our organization to block those threat actors. So this is a little bit of the so what. Why should we conduct threat modeling in the first place? Number one is it's going to allow us to empower our team, which is the name of this slide, convenient. Prioritize threats that are going to attack our industry or our type of business. Enable better collaboration between the teams. We're all working off the same piece of paper to better our security posture. We're going to have better collaboration and better results. And then reduce the attack surface. Ultimately, the goal of a threat model is to get down to where our vulnerability or where our risk lies and filling those gaps with the proper controls, whether those be processes, technology, within your security. So let's talk about starting with the plan. And this kind of goes into the collaboration piece that we talked about. There are a lot of threat groups, over 200 documented threat groups. They all go by different names, different code names, so on and so forth, and over 500 techniques and tools and software that are used by attackers. That is a huge undertaking. And so if you just kind of jumped in and said, hey, I want to block against all 500 techniques, software, and applications used by attackers. It's really difficult and probably impossible to jump in just with 2 feet there. So what this threat modeling process allows you to do is break those things down to things that are more suited for your business based off your industry and the attackers or threat actors that are in your industry, and which TTPs are they using. Which ones hold the most probability that an attacker is going to use on your business, so we can prioritize which controls should be in place, which data sources that we should be collecting, or which processes we should have in place to combat those threat actors. So let's talk a little bit about knowing your enemy. And this is how our industry approach to threat modeling works. You can't really talk about knowing your enemy without talking about the MITRE ATT&CK framework, which is a huge collection of a bunch of threat actors with all the TTPs or techniques that they use in order to attack your business. And so, we start here with the vertical, understanding the vertical, the threat groups. This is where threat intelligence comes in hand, understanding these different threat actors, which types of software they're using, which TTPs that they're using. There's a lot of research that goes into this piece to really start the building blocks for understanding the threat groups and the different tactics and techniques that they may use based on the industries that they attack. And then ultimately getting to recommendations. So we kind of combine these things: vertical, threat groups, understand the tactics and techniques that are used by those threat groups, and then build recommendations based off of the data sources or the controls or processes that are going to help you combat those threat groups. So this goes a little bit more into building a plan and bringing all those things together. And this is where a tool can come in handy. Pulling together the information for the threat groups and the verticals, the different tactics and techniques, all the threat intelligence research that was conducted to figure out the different threat groups and where they're targeting, and then ultimately making those recommendations. So this is really geared towards understanding those vulnerabilities so we can start to fill them with the proper controls. So this is just an example of what a threat modeling output might look like. We can see we have the different threat groups, we have the different TTPs that are associated. When that TTP or when that threat actor was last active. It's hard to see here, but you need to prioritize these things based off of how many people are using them, many threat actors in your industry are using them, and how common they are. And that way we know which data sources that we should be grabbing, or which technical controls we should be putting in place to be able to stop those specific threat actors. It really comes down to really prioritizing your resources, so you're not buying things that aren't going to give you good coverage, and making sure that those gaps are filled. So if you have a threat actor, or you have a lot of threat actors in your industry that are using privilege escalation as a means to move through your network, then you want to make sure that you're viewing that. You want to make sure that you have the logs in place to see that, and you want to make sure you have the processes involved to make sure you can stop that if you are to see it or detect it within your organization. So in conclusion, it's good to invest in threat modeling. It is good for all maturity levels. I've seen success with people who are very mature, and then people who are just starting out. And in regards to, if you have a plan to start with, it's a good starting point for building your, or for improving your security posture. But if you do, maybe you have some of those things covered, some of those TTPs covered within your organization. There's always room to go to the lower priority techniques that your threat actors are using in your industry, and start building controls against those. So you can always improve your posture. Ultimately, we're going to empower our team. We're going to get that collaboration going between everybody in our team. And then we're going to understand our enemies. So we're going to understand the different threat actors that are attacking us, what means they're going to use to attack us, and then what we need to put in place to stop or detect those attacks. And then the last thing here is, if we build and we communicate a plan, we can start to prioritize those different resources that we have. We can start prioritize efforts in collecting data. So if one source of data is a lot more important based off of your threat model, you can prioritize that and getting it into a SIEM, get some detection around it, or putting some services around that particular detection. And so we're looking pretty good on time. So I'm going to turn it back over to Amber. So we should have a good amount of time for some questions. We'll go from there.
Absolutely. So if you do have questions, please feel free to use the questions or the chat panel. We can pick them up from either spot. A few have been submitted already. So Justin, our first question, can you talk to me a little bit about how one of your clients has benefited from threat modeling?
Absolutely. So imagine we go into an engagement with a financial service company. They're pretty mature. They have some EDR agents deployed. They have some firewall logging going, and they're reasonably mature. They don't have much in detection for, let's say, privilege escalation or process creation. Some of the EDR did a good job at catching some of that stuff, but not everything. Through the threat model, we were able to figure out that was one of their higher probable attacks to their environment. We identified that there was a gap in the endpoint that they were using that didn't cover that specific process creation. And so the threat modeling report pointed us to collecting logs in order to detect that and to block it in the long run. And so when they are attacked by threat groups that target their industry, we know for sure that we can see that type of activity that they may use. And it kind of goes back into we've kind of more into a behavioral detection, detecting the behavior of an adversary, and less of just a single event. So less than just a single IPS event or a single event within my application logs or Windows logs, and more of a model for how they attack and what their behaviors are like within the kill chain.
Very good. One other question that we do have. So someone's asking, how can I use this threat modeling process to strengthen my company's overall security?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, we talked about knowing your enemy is the first part. And so by knowing what tactics and techniques, what tools and software are going to be used against you, you can better defend against those. And so if you don't know, we're kind of just guessing, right? We're kind of just assuming that our threat actors are using the same thing as everybody else. And so without having a model, without having a plan, we're kind of guessing at, we're throwing darts at a board and hoping to hit the bullseye on what threat actors are going to try to do in our environment. And with a threat model report, you're able to intelligently understand which, where you need to focus your time and resources.
Excellent. All right. I am not seeing any additional questions at this point in time, but if folks do have any other questions that you think of a little bit later, or after you've had some time to digest today's information, you can still submit those to us at webinars@newspire.com, and we'll be happy to answer those directly for you. At this point in time, we're going to end a little bit early, but I don't think anybody has ever complained about a shorter webinar, maybe a longer one, but not a shorter one. So we'll give you a little bit of time back in your day. If you do wish to join us for any other upcoming sessions like today's, please visit newspire.com/events. We have several presentations coming up in February, including our highly anticipated Q4 and 2020 year in review threat report. So we'll have more information up there about that very soon. With that, on behalf of Newspire and Justin, I'd like to thank you for joining us today, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.